Hello Minigame fans, it's a big week of releases with a viral hit or two, more action roguelites as well as the return of an iconic indie game character, so let's begin with Big Helmet Heroes, a 3D beat-em-up title that combines combat and adventure. Choose from 4 playable characters in the Balanced Warrior, the Powerful Brute, the Stealthy Rogue or the Agile Monk, each with unique skills and abilities as you fight your way through the kingdom in order to save the princess. This, of course, follows a long lineage of beat-em-ups, Castle Crashers included, only in 3D with a rather adorable looking chibi proportions to the characters and does support 2-player co-op so you can play with a friend. With the self-described movie quality animations looking impressive, at least from the trailer, and should be a good one of these. The release of Ailuri crept up on me, where this is a gorgeous hand-drawn action platformer about a red panda on a quest to restore balance to the forest. I last covered it when it was on Kickstarter, raising a decent 73,000 Australian dollars, which I suspect was in large part due to the adorable plushie that came with certain tiers and simply looks like a gorgeous game, but we'll have to see on the tightness of the controls. Love indie games? Sign up to my newsletter to get a weekly dose of what's hot, along with some news and of course, weekly game giveaways, so if interested, link is in the description below. Yes, Vampire Survivors style titles are still rolling out in 2025, with an interesting looking one of these being Valkyrie Squad Siege Breakers, differing in several aspects which might make it of note. For example, you are controlling a squad of 3 playable characters, but can swap out the leader at any time, which affects different ultimate skills. Of course, there is a waifu aspect to this game, but also, you are attempting to break through the enemy's fortified defenses, so it might differ a little bit more in terms of structure, with the boss fights being a highlight as well as permanent progression in the form of an upgradable base, and looks like a decent entry in this space. I last covered Stray Path when previewing the games of the month, being a roguelite deck builder, but where other games have drawn from poker or blackjack, this instead calls upon free cell, which you don't see every day. It is framed as a dungeon crawler, so you are flipping over cards which can have enemies or items on them, and then stacking or arranging them like in Free Cell, where you have options on whether or not to engage in combat, to run away or to discard certain items if they do not fit in with your strategy. There will also be multiple classes and various strategies to use, having some decent pixel art and looks up my alley. If you love survival base builders with some element of tower defense of games like Thronefall or They Are Billions, then Border Pioneer might be of interest, in which you play as a pioneer, embarking on a journey to tame the frontier. You do so by gathering resources and constructing buildings, also training troops and building walls to funnel enemies into choke points to destroy them, and has a neat, if minimalist, pixel art look as well. There's also a deck building element which will affect which building you can construct, being an interesting mix of city builder and defense strategy, and should be good as well. Other games begin with Astral Throne, a roguelite strategy RPG in which you lead your party of characters through a once prosperous land which is now shrouded in a memory-stealing fog due to a fallen star. In concept, this kind of resembles a roguelite Fire Emblem game, with combat taking place on a square grid where you have both weapons and magic triangles to manage, having to use the right attack to exploit the weaknesses of your enemies. Encounters are handcrafted, but there is variation in terms of enemy spawns, characters that can join your party for the run, as well as the layout of the overworld map, with weapons, items and relics adding even more replayability, although it should be noted that there is no mention of permanent progression and carryover between runs, so we'll have to see how that plays out. Ever wondered what it's like to run a vampire bar? Bar Tycoon lets you do just that, having an interesting duality to the game since you are managing a regular bar upfront to attract the humans in, but on the back end have to hypnotize patrons and to drain some of their blood to create beverages for the other vampires. But beware, since you don't want to attract unnecessary attention from vampire hunters. The core Tycoon experience is here, including hiring and management of staff, as well as furnishing and determining the layout of your bar, also having a cast of intriguing elder vampires which you have to please to gain their favour or risk incurring their wrath, and will be for fans of the genre. This title shadow dropped about 8 days ago, which is not a strategy that I am fond of, since while you get some oohs and ahs for showing and then saying that this game is available right now, the vast majority of players will not even be aware of your game, which appears to be the case with Don't Get Got, despite it coming from Bossa Studios, makers of Surgeon Simulator and I Am Bread. This is a co-op horror title, think Lethal Company, in which doll-like humanoid creatures are stalking you, which appear to only move when you are not looking at them, where you have to use scanners, a torchlight and decoys to stay safe so that you can find the key to escape. Looking to be a creepy looking one of these, but needs to be rebalanced based on Steam reviews, where the surprise release might not have worked since they did not follow the Landfall playbook of making content warning free to claim for the first 24 hours, as well as the kind of random drop in January, but they did release 2 updates so far, which is fast iteration, so let's see where this lands. I last mentioned Everwarder in my video on upcoming tower defense games, and here it is, being a roguelite title with a more freeform approach to the defense of your crystal located at the center of your operations, but where enemies can attack from all sides and are not just limited to lanes. You must defend the crystal and to push back the darkness, summoning creatures which act as towers while you dig out the surrounding areas, with roguelite style choice of randomized upgrades within a run, as well as permanent progression in between runs, having a neat if minimalist pixel art style and looks fun. Here's a 3D rage game that might be interesting named Get Tilted Smiley Face, in which you play as a potted plant that has to tilt and jump its way up and out of the depths of a city. The core mechanics revolve around tilting and jumping, requiring precise control and timing, where in case you didn't notice, the pot does not have legs, so you cannot walk to reposition yourself with the normal amount of precision for a platformer, with some tricky looking obstacles and hazards to overcome. The pot can break if you fall from too great a height, which I'm assuming means you must restart, looking like just the right amount of aggravating, especially with the smiley face design on the pot. We also have the release of Heinz Honor and Revenge, a single player narrative focused beat 'em up in which you play as Heinz, a secret agent with a reputation as a reliable troubleshooter in handling the most dangerous and difficult missions, fighting back against ruthless criminal syndicates on behalf of your country. This is an action-packed title with a narrative hook since there is a vast conspiracy that threatens global security which you need to unravel. The core beat-em-up action looks fun, where our hero has access to regular punches and kicks, but also special area of attack abilities to take on multiple enemies at once, where you need to manage the crowd of enemies since the game does throw quite a number of them at you. Along with regular enemies are a variety of bosses, including a ninja shown in this trailer, and also a dual machine gun wielding madman and more, which adds more challenge. There's a main story campaign to progress, but if you feel unprepared for the next mission, you can take on side missions to gain XP to power up your abilities, with gameplay variation in the objectives for each mission, such as blowing up enemy buildings. Additionally, there are also some puzzle elements in the game, which means that it is not just a beat-em-up brawler, but a dynamic mix of storytelling, puzzles, shooting mechanics and combat, having a neat art style as well, especially in character portraits and cutscenes. A demo release of note is Kitchen Wars Appetiser, a fast-paced party game designed for 2 to 8 players that throws you into the chaos of a restaurant where they must do their best to serve their customers on time, but also engage in strategic combat and theft with respect to their opponent. There will be various upgrades and improvements for your restaurant, which is combined with the hectic minute-to-minute action as players run around like headless chickens, scrambling to serve food, throw entire trash cans over to the other side, or to steal chairs so that customers have nowhere to sit. This appetizer version offers a limited taste of the full game, allowing you to play about 60 minutes or so if interested, grab a couple of friends to try this out, and if interested, wishlist the full game and look forward to its release. This next title simply oozes style, where there is a Makima looking character in Of the Devil, which did get my attention, being an episodic mystery visual novel game set in a cyberpunk world in the year 2086. This is a detective title in which you have to examine 3D crime scenes and interrogate other characters, with the repeat mention of the character's killer insight, where I'm unsure as to whether or not there's a double meaning here, mixing this detective bit with an almost card game style title where you can call their bluff and essentially shout objection to shatter the lies of the other character, and looks very sleek. Another title from the Tower Defense Games video is Rogue Monster Rush, a roguelite tower defense title in which you command an array of monster defenders to protect their town from relentless robot invasions. This game emphasizes strategic planning, requiring you to position your towers effectively and to utilize their unique abilities to fend off waves of enemies, with additional elements like resource management and leader abilities to master if you want to stop them from destroying your town. Critically, you will be able to place down tiles that form the lanes where enemies will walk, which is an added layer of strategy, with the usage of monsters rather than towers being interesting since these monsters can evolve and have different forms, and looks like it's for fans of the genre. A spooky looking title is Slender Threads, a paranormal point-and-click adventure game that follows the harrowing journey of a travelling salesman named Harvey Green. Upon arrival at a quiet seaside town, he becomes entangled in a series of horrific deaths and must race against time to prevent becoming the next victim himself, since his unexplained recurring nightmares seem to be a foretelling of an inescapable fate. Point-and-click adventure games tend to fall in the more light-hearted end of things, even adding in humour in paranormal titles like The Dark Side Detective, so for a game like this to lean fully into the horror is interesting, although I do wonder what the crossover in audiences would be like. This has the classic point-and-click exploration, puzzle solving and dialogue with characters, with a rather freaky looking art style that does add to the game. I want to give a special mention to Starship Troopers Terran Command, since this is one of the more successful Starship Troopers titles, and interestingly, is a real-time strategy game despite being published by Slytherin, who are more known for their turn-based strategy games, which has two substantial DLCs named Urban Onslaught and Raising Hell. But I want to talk about the Territory mode open beta released 2 weeks ago, which is a mode designed for replayability as the Federation and Arachnids fight over control of territory points, adding a grander strategy element to the otherwise one-off RTS missions, with this mode being updated as well, and you can opt in by selecting the Betas tab on the Properties menu of the game on Steam, and looks to be getting even better. I'm not usually a horror game person, but even I have to admit that Studio System Guardian Angel looks super cool, a survival horror title that has an interesting setup, where in the days before the end of your time at high school, one of your friends reveals that there is an abandoned film studio beneath the school, and just as you are about to explore, things go black, and when you awaken, all the students and your friends are gone and you are left all alone, with the lone driving thought of end the cycle. This is a fixed camera survival horror game where, get this, you can use the fixed camera to defeat enemies and to solve puzzles, which is something that I did not expect, and I'm curious as to how that works, along with a visually stark art style that makes it stand out and will certainly be for horror game fans, and is the hidden gem of the week. Speaking of horror games, UNDERWARD is a 1 to 4 player co-op horror title that comes to us from a Japan-based company, being similar to the Kletka and Murky Divers of the world, in which you play as hazmat suit-wearing investigators exploring a deadly underground abandoned hospital with the objective of retrieving test subject monsters and bringing them back to the elevator. The almost photorealistic bodycam look of this game is freaky, combined with some terrifying monster designs, makes this look rather intense, but if Lethal Company is anything to go by, might end up being hilarious if you're just messing around with your friends, but looks like an interesting entry in this genre. We also have the release of Welcome Back Commander, set in the same universe as this developer's other games in Chromosome Evil 1 and 2, in which a deadly plague has infected the city and all communication with the administration has been cut off, and you play as the commander of a strike team having to make strategic choices and to deploy your troops in order to find answers about the plague. This is a real-time tactics title with some cosmic horror element here, since facing off against the infected and tentacled horrors will affect the sanity of your troops, where the developer says that it is short, with 5 chapters represented by 5 DEFCON levels, but will have some replayability in the form of randomly generated content, multiple paths, and multiple endings. A neat looking soccer title is World Rumble, looking like a classic 3v3 arcades sports game, but does have unique anthropomorphic animals with special abilities as well as a roguelike structure. This takes the form of various arenas as well as unlocks within a run, extending to new characters to choose from between playthroughs, and does look like a fun take on the genre. Critically, the goalkeeper is not under your control, so I wonder how that works in terms of balance, with of course co-op or PvP modes for up to 6 players, i.e. everyone controls one character, and looks intriguing as a concept, but I do wonder how much depth there will be to this game. I absolutely love the idea for this title, since While Waiting comes to us from the developers of the critically acclaimed Moncage, a diorama-based puzzle game, where this title puts you in various everyday situations where you essentially just need to wait, but I guess what you do while waiting is what makes it funny, but at the same time can be seen as an art game of commentary on the arts of patience and acceptance. You're presented with a variety of real-life scenarios, such as waiting at the supermarket checkout line for the cashier to check out the seemingly hundreds of items from the person in front of you, to waiting for a computer to update, to standing around at the baggage claim area in an airport, to getting stuck in traffic and more, where I believe technically if you do nothing, the situation should resolve itself, but it's what happens around it that makes it interesting and looks awesome as well. If you ever came across that Reddit post about a guy that just wants to dig a hole in his yard to see how far he could get down, even to the extent of building makeshift supports to prevent the collapse of said tunnel, well, the developer of this game saw it as well and decided to make a game about digging a hole. You are tasked with excavating a hole using all sorts of tools and upgrades to enlarge it and to get further and further down, with some elements of a mining game like SteamWorld Dig, in that you can get resources and minerals to sell to get money for more upgrades, with some mention of some underground truth to be discovered, which might or might not be a monster, and is a clever use of Reddit for a game idea if I ever saw one. Here's an interesting release which is not typical of this developer, since Keep Driving is an atmospheric management RPG about life on the open road, in which you are young and have heard about a festival on the other side of the country, deciding to jump in your car and to make the road trip across, picking up hitchhikers along the way and having to maintain, upgrade and repair your vehicle as well. It is set in the early 2000s in Sweden, which probably reflects the developer's own age and experiences, since you can do activities like collecting and listening to songs on CDs, having the tunes of local Swedish indie bands to accompany you on your trip. There is quote-unquote turn-based combat, where you need to react to different situations, but otherwise looks rather lighthearted, although it does take inspiration from FTL and Oregon Trail, so I don't know what happens if your car dies halfway on the trip, if you get slapped with a huge game over message and have to try again, or if it is more relaxed than that, but it's certainly a departure from their other games, Sea Salt and Post Void, both of which are great, making this of note. I'm back and forth between these top two today, so I have sworn in this position, being a Hades-style action roguelite set in a fallen Camelot, where you are battling a corrupted King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, being able to call upon the Fey Lords to borrow their powers like the Olympic gods in Hades, having a cool comic book inspired art style as well, and does have co-op support for up to 4 players, so maybe a bit more Raven's Watch inspired, and will be an early access release of note. Crypt of the NecroDancer is one of my all-time favourite indie games, since it combines the DDR style movement to the beat with a classic turn-based, grid-based dungeon crawling roguelike, also seen in the notable crossover Cadence of Hyrule, where yes, Cadence is back in Rift of the NecroDancer, a more classic rhythm game where it has note highways, one-on-one boss fights, and most interestingly, Rhythm Heaven style segments which I love the look of, so this is a no-brainer.
You ask me like I have a choice.
Hello indie-game fans, it's an action-packed week with some long-in-development titles, first-person action, the return of another indie icon, and possibly the next big thing, so let's begin with SteamDolls' Order of
Chaos.
A title which I considered putting in my upcoming Metroidvanias video, but thought better of it since it has been in development for a long time, only for them to drop an early access release date for this steampunk-ish title with stealth elements, having the voice of Snake, David Hayter, providing his talents to this game, looking neat but I'm cautious around this, with another action title of interest being Sancticide, a third-person action roguelite in which you play as a sin collector during the biblical end times, in theory having to eradicate all sin in the name of God. But of course, our protagonist embarks on his greatest challenge to date. This is based on a Polish novel series which seems to be pretty popular, with intense looking third-person combat that spans melee weapons, but also guns and magic. The character will have access to purple powers, allowing him to alter time and perception, kinetically manipulate objects and enemies, as well as benefit from passive improvements with the classic roguelite gameplay loop of getting upgrades after you die and looks neat. We also have the early access release of Novus Orbis, a roguelite deck builder with a twist, having a countdown system for enemies that determine when they attack, which can even be in the middle of your turn. There's also a combo system where each card has a cost and a combo value, and playing cards in the correct sequence maximizes their effects, while breaking the combo can yield alternative outcomes. The game is also set in a broken world, occurring in a space-time loop, where I do appreciate it when developers bother to explain the run-based structure in this genre. This will be an early access release with 2 character classes to choose from, with a third planned to be added, with each having over 100 class-specific cards across 6 types: attack, skill, equipment, item, special, and affliction, so there's plenty to strategize around, since you can even add blessings, pets, and much more, and will be for fans of the genre, as will be Guns of Fury for Metroidvania fans. Since I had this on my list of games to cover, but the developers confirmed a release date, so here it is, being a run-and-gun action platformer with a sick throwback pixel art look, and essentially seems to be Metal Slug but a Metroidvania. I do love both of those things, so a game like this appeals to me, in which you play as Vincent Fury, a special operative, on a mission to infiltrate a top-secret research facility, rescue a scientist from the villain, and to retrieve his tetracell invention, which the bad guys want to use to make a super weapon. As such, it seems like your classic Saturday morning cartoon kind of plot, which is awesome, with the expected interconnected world filled with enemies, secrets, destructible walls, new abilities and weapons, including access to a mech-like armor, also having alternate endings, looking pretty good, and contributes to 2025 being the year of the Metroidvania, with yet another action title of interest being Reality Break, a self-styled space action RPG looter-shooter in which you pilot a spaceship playing as a mercenary who gains the ability to alter reality. The core gameplay resembles a twin-stick shooter, but where there is an innovative rewrite mechanic, in which you can modify almost anything in the game, from equipment attributes to unlocking new abilities, to doubling the timer in a mission, resizing a powerful weapon so that it can fit on your ship, and so much more. Of course, balance will be a big factor in this game, since this rewrite ability seems overpowered, with a larger narrative of battling sinister and malevolent forces in the universe and attempting to stop their evil plans. Interestingly, this has an opt-in roguelite element as well, where you can reset the timeline to gain reality points for permanent upgrades. But if you're sick of roguelites, the standard mode is always there and looks neat, where this comes to us from a solo developer and seems impressive. Other games begin with Astronomics, a neat-looking sci-fi space sandbox crafting action-adventure title in which you explore randomly generated asteroids, mining them for resources using robots, and using these to upgrade, repair, and more, all as you save up for a ticket back to Earth. The use of robots for automation instead of conveyor belts is an interesting choice, where you not only have to use worker bots, but also command bots for multitasking, so the way that you set up your mining operations could be interesting. There is an antagonistic force in Space Pirates which you need to fend off, and looks like a pretty good one of these, but if you prefer more action, Darkblade Ascent will be of interest, a first-person slasher but with a roguelike structure, in which you fight your way through dark fantasy locations with randomly generated weapons and upgrades being made by two brothers who did reach out to me, so I wanted to help them along. There will be a variety of classes to choose from, each with distinct talent trees and abilities, including fire and lightning magic on top of your melee attacks, with of course permanent progression and a talent tree which carries over from run to run. But this is pretty much all gameplay, with no mention of story at all, but that is not such a big problem considering the space they are in. But back to strategy titles with Dawnfolk, a neat looking minimalist city builder with a survival element, in which you are constructing a village and rebuilding your realm, pushing back the darkness and to protect your people from the oppressive shadow, which does take the form of shadowy creatures which you end up battling. The game emphasizes strategic planning and resource management, requiring you to construct and upgrade building as well as manage your settlers with unique minigames to add in some extra variety. Your choices directly impact the development of your village and the well-being of its inhabitants, leading to various possible outcomes, and thus remind me of .H, which is awesome, so this could be neat, as could be Maraka, a sci-fi action roguelite with physics-based combat, allowing you to harness magnetic forces to push, pull and propel objects and enemies. Set in a procedurally generated cave system on an alien planet, utilize a magnetic gun to manipulate the environment, turning obstacles into weapons against these frenzied creatures. The fully destructible environment adds a layer of strategy, enabling creative approaches to combat with a bit of Vampire Survivor style horde survival feel, but not exactly a straight up clone, so it stands out, with extraction shooter elements where you collect resources and have to get out safely if you want to keep them, and looks neat and is the hidden gem of the week, as is the case with Mayhemers as well. A title that has blank, white, nondescript character models that does remind me of Human Fall Flat, but does have a multiplayer focus instead, pitting the Mayhemers against the Guardians in a world of
Chaos.
Mayhemers aim to cause destruction to earn
Chaos
points, starting fires and beating up people, and having to get to the escape area once they have enough points, where the Guardians must stop them instead, catching and imprisoning the members of the other team with a variety of items and weapons to add to the fun, along with procedurally generated environments to keep the experience fresh, although the concern with multiplayer focused titles will always be player population, which will not be the case for Metal Suit's Counter Attack, a single player only pixel art action platformer in which you play as an old and sick war hero whose nursing spaceship was blown up by aliens, causing him to lose his dog, but is now reborn in a cyborg body and goes on a quest for revenge. This side-scrolling run-and-gun title emphasizes intense combat, allowing you to utilize various combat suits discovered throughout the game, each with unique features and abilities, giving you plenty of options in combat. There are also 9 mysterious planets in the Helios system to battle on, each hiding their own secrets, and thus have a great pixel art look as well, with a platformer of the roguelite variety instead being Project TACHYON, this time coming to us from a Japanese developer instead of the Korean one of the previous title, where Studio N9 also made the JRPG Aria Chronicle, which is neat, which makes this of interest. You play as Sigma, an agent capable of time travel, on a mission to prevent the uprising of artificial intelligence and to fight for the future. Combat here mixes both melee and ranged weapons, although guns do seem to be the priority, having the expected roguelite style upgrades that carry over from run to run. This has 130 powerful genes in 9 different categories to choose from, which means plenty of ways to customize your character, and unlike some other roguelites in this list, does have a story and a narrative to tell, with our main character's ability to retain memories through time travel being critical, and has a fantastic look as well, as expected from this developer, where Towers and Goblins The Last Stand has a very different kind of art style, going for pixel art instead, and was last seen in my video on upcoming tower defense games. This might have more RTS leanings since you are building a base and also recruiting troops to defend against waves of goblins, making use of the geography and terrain to maximize damage while minimizing losses. There is a whole resource gathering aspect of wood, food and stone used in the construction of more buildings, upgrading existing ones or training more troops, where I'm interested in the structure of the game, whether it is about surviving for as long as possible, or if you eventually have to take the fight to the enemy base, with a very different kind of game being Weirdo, a black and white manga-style visual novel set in a high school where you play as an ambitious yet ordinary student with a troubled family background who might or might not be the villain of the story. From the art style and look, it sure looks like a horror manga where the protagonist is determined to complete his quote-unquote experiments before the end of his time in high school, featuring 4 major chapters and over 100,000 word script, more than 20 characters, 100 choices, 4 main endings and 2 hidden ones, and looks like it's for fans of the genre, with this drawing upon a Chinese manhwa series of short stories named Parallel, and will have some returning characters from their other games, with another spooky visual novel being Urban Myth Dissolution Center, one of the most anticipated titles of the week, where you play as a new recruit at an organization specializing in investigating urban legends and supernatural occurrences. This has adventure and mystery elements requiring you to collect evidence, analyze social media posts, and interact with various characters to unravel the truth behind each case, where the center director is a psychic, so it has that thriller anime kind of vibe to the game. There is an episodic structure as you tackle one case after the next, with I believe all of these being linked in some way as part of the grander story, having a sick pixel art look as well. And if you love internet creepypasta, this will be your gem, but going all the way over to the other end in terms of vibes is Afterlove R.E.P, the third visual novel adventure game in a row, which is not typical of this channel, but that's just how the cards fell this week, having a deeply personal story behind it that might just bring you to tears. This was the work of Indonesian developer Fahmi, who also made Coffee Talk, beloved in the game dev community, who sadly passed away in 2022 at way too young an age, with the rest of the team soldiering on to complete this title. Set in modern-day Jakarta, this blends visual novel, narrative adventure and rhythm game elements together to tell an equally heart-wrenching tale of a young musician grappling with the death of his girlfriend. He has been stuck in limbo for more than a year, neglecting his music, relationships and even his own mental health, while hearing his girlfriend's voice in his head, but he now has a month to get it together, since his band has a big show coming up and has to deliver new songs or they would have to move on without him. Over 28 days, your choices will shape his journey as he interacts with friends, explores the city, and works on his music with side-scrolling exploration, meaningful narrative conversations, and even rhythm game style segments when he jams with the band, with multiple story paths and endings to discover, along with one of the prettiest art styles that I have come across. Legacy, Steel and Sorcery is a PvPvE extraction RPG that looks and plays like a third-person action RPG, but where your loot is on the line every time you venture out. Yes, this takes that extraction shooter gameplay loop, but applies it in a fantasy setting where you can team up with up to 2 other players to go on a quest to slay dangerous monsters, but have to watch out for other players who might be lurking in the shadows waiting for an opportunity to strike. Combat is built from the ground up for PvP with responsive dodge, block, sprint, attack and cast, with the early access launch having 4 classes to choose from in Warrior, Hunter, Rogue and Priest, each with unique abilities, like the Warrior being able to smash through walls. in between expeditions, you can retreat to the safety behind the walls of the city, interacting with vendors, completing quests, managing your inventory, crafting and upgrading your private room at the inn so that you will be better prepared for the next adventure. With this having a huge amount of hype behind it, so let's see if they will manage to nail it with another title that is pretty much a sure bet, being Mind Over Magic as well, a Magic Academy colony sim title which is launching out of early access. The existing academy is cursed, so while you build up the school and train powerful mages, you also have to send expeditions into the Underschool, a mysterious underground dungeon beneath the academy teeming with monsters. As such, this combines the Tycoon game building elements of having to place every piece of furniture, light and decoration in the school itself, with managing timetables and schedules for the students, assigning teachers to tasks and more, with the almost JRPG style turn-based combat in the dungeons, where there's a huge appetite for this kind of game and setting, so I expect the 1.0 release to bring a lot of new eyes to this game and could possibly be one of the most popular games of the year, as would be the case for this next title, which after a little bit of a delay sees the release of this rage platformer with a twist, since the developer swapped out the pixel art of the first game for a sweet 2.5D look and also added combat to Jump King Quest. Yes, you are still attempting to make your way up to get the hot babe at the top, but this time in the end times, having to battle enemies and other players along the way, where there is no game over screen, but the punishment is falling down, losing possibly hours of progress, looking to be equally frustrating and challenging. Hello Unigame fans, it's a great week of new releases as developers get their games out before the Steam Next Festival, with adventure games, some interesting roguelites, cozy games, an immersive sim and so much more. So let's begin with Star of Providence, or more specifically, the Switch port of a game from 2017, formerly known as Monolith, where the developers did not want to risk a cease and desist from Warner Bros, so they changed the title. This is one of my favourite roguelites since it has some of the most intense combat and some fun secrets, and is now under publisher Big Mode, who also published Animal Well and is headed up by Donkey, so there should be significant marketing muscle behind this, with the launch coinciding with a content update to the PC version titled Into Oblivion, with more of everything, so it's a great time to go back, with a slower paced title being The Silent Kingdom, an otome JRPG that is very anime, mixing visual novel style storytelling with turn-based JRPG combat. This title was successfully kickstarted and does have its share of fans, in which you play as a princess whose kingdom has succumbed to a sorrowful curse. To save her realm, she must confront formidable challenges, including defying the goddess herself and corrupting your own soul to save your people, having to weigh the sacrifices that the three characters need to make as compared to the entire kingdom, and thus have some fantastic looking art. Stories from Soul the Gun Dog is a visual novel game in which you play as a newly reassigned security officer aboard the Jovian patrol ship Gundog, tasked with investigating mysterious signals at the edge of space, where a routine mission escalates into a battle for survival against an unknown threat. Our protagonist is traumatized from the loss of their crewmates during the war, and now has to find a way to adapt to this new crew and situation, with the overhanging threat of enemies from outside, as well as possibly within the ship itself, as you question loyalties and explores themes of conspiracy and paranoia among the characters. This has traditional point-and-click mechanics, allowing you to navigate various ship locations, interact with crew members, and analyze clues in order to advance the narrative, having some awesome character designs and pixel art, which pays tribute to classic PC 9800 titles, which seem to be fairly popular in Japan, but this developer is an international crew and have nailed exactly what they are going for. The same can be said for Blood Typers as well. Perhaps a spin on a spin, since this is a survival horror title with co-op support that sees you exploring cursed locations, completing objectives and trying to escape. Of course, it resembles light gun titles like House of the Dead and its parody Typing of the Dead, and seems to have looped back around, where you have to use your keyboard for all interactions in this game. It's weird, unique, and has a neat look, and has the potential to be popular since it's an interesting mix of ideas with room for expansion due to the different possible locations as well as procedural generation of levels to keep each playthrough fresh, with a very different kind of game being Microtopia, in which you play as the hive mind of a robot ant colony, managing and expanding your settlement. Utilize pheromone trails to create, automate, and optimize supply chains for your ants, collecting resources, producing goods, and to feed your queen, with the distinct lack of conveyor belts making this feel like quite a different kind of game. As your colony grows, you can upgrade worker ants into specialized roles like flying ants, diggers, and inventors, having to master the use of sensors and logic gates in this game, which is something different to wrap your head around. Progress through a tech tree to unlock new features and expand your colony by exploring nearby islands and sending new queens to establish colonies there, all with a fantastic art style as well and looks very strategic. Other games begin with Cinnabunny, an absolutely adorable, cozy life sim title in which you play as a bunny running a bakery in the charming village of Sugar Creek Burrows. Learn and customize various recipes from breads to pies by adding unique ingredients like berries and spices, and sell them to save up enough money so that you can move your entire family to this bunny paradise as well. You have to forage for ingredients and cultivate your own, including heading into the mines to get salt, as well as to engage in activities like bird watching, mushroom collecting, and capturing rogue recyclobots. Interact with fellow bunny villagers, building relationships by sharing your baked goods and discovering their preferences, along with bakery customization, since that also serves as a living space, drawing upon games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, where if their previous game, Bun House, is anything to go by, this should be a hit with cozy gamers, with perhaps a game on the polar opposite end of things in terms of vibes, being Fish Fear Me, a top-down action roguelite which does seem to be Vampire Survivors cross-stretch in concept. Cast your line to hook various aquatic adversaries, then confront and defeat them to sell their bones for profit, with a variety of boat and weapon upgrades along the way. You have a cosmic debt of 1 billion coins to repay, which should take a long time to pay off, but the game also talks about sea monster bounties and eldritch mysteries, which should be intriguing if you can get over the low fidelity visuals. There will be multiple maps, diverse biomes, and a vast array of fish species to catch, with this coming to us from developer Heather Flowers, also known for Snake Farm, which makes this of note. With another action roguelite title of the week being Gunforged, a whimsical action roguelite with less of a Vampire Survivors influence, instead having more self-contained arenas with the main gimmick of weapon crafting where creativity is key. Sure, the concept has been done before, so it's a matter of the variation in terms of mods and abilities available to you, with the combination of randomized parts which might just result in that overpowered build to allow you to destroy your enemies with ease. You are altering damage, fire rate, and range, along with using runes to enhance your guns, each adding special effects like causing enemies to explode into gold or adding bullet ricochet, where stacking and exploiting these will be the keys to success. There's also a roguelite style choice between 3 random upgrades after every wave, which gives you abilities such as summoning lightning storms or to convert stamina into health. The more closed-off arenas does have a bit more level design as compared to the near infinite endless levels of Bullet Heaven titles, also adding in challenging boss fights and permanent progression between runs, with added factors like a loot goblin companion, as well as a prize wheel to spin, looking like a good one of these, with another hectic title that might not look like it at first glance being Mini City Mayhem, a modular chaos-filled city builder in which you are using Lego-like blocks to build out your city, with the different coloured blocks representing different kinds of buildings, having to stack and assemble them while still being mindful of how they connect to each other. Residences need to be connected to workplaces and utilities, for example, with the population of the city being of concern as well, all while you race against the clock. But if that is too much for you, it does have multiple modes like a Zen mode for no timer, Patient mode for slower timer, Freeform Sandbox, a tower building stacking mode, as well as a crane option, and looks interesting. And speaking of which, I do have my eye on No Skin as well, a cool looking horror roguelite RPG set within a mysterious house filled with lurking terrors. You're investigating something known as the No Skin Man, which sounds creepy as is, and is aided by the unique art style, mixing photographs in the background with hand-drawn pixel art characters to give it an unsettling and weird vibe. As you navigate the procedurally generated rooms, you encounter various enemies, each of which can be confronted directly in combat, or you can engage in conversation, definitely having Undertale influence, and while horror is not usually my thing, this does look like the hidden gem of the week. My runner-up for Hidden Gem is Spell Hack, a roguelite deck builder with a twist, in that it not only has a throwback pixel art style reminiscent of DOS games, but also takes place in real time as compared to their turn-based counterparts. By day, explore Doom City to collect and upgrade your techno spells, enhancing your spell drive's capabilities, and by night, use these to fend off waves of summoned beasts, preventing them from destroying your portal so that you can survive for one more day. There seems to be some sort of meta story element as well, since the developers mention characters with no ulterior motives as one of their key points on Steam, so there's more to this game than meets the eye and does seem to be going under the radar, but is one example of why I love indie games since they can be so cool and weird. Another sleek looking title is Cabernet, a narrative RPG set in a 19th century Eastern European inspired world but with a modern twist, in which you play as Lisa, a newly turned vampire grappling with her new reality among the unsuspecting townsfolk. This is an RPG focusing on the role-playing part of the definition, since you're playing as the character but does not have turn-based combat or loot, rather being focused on making critical decisions as she finds her place in the world. You have to mingle and make friends or enemies of the humans, but also members of vampiric society, where your thirst for blood means that some of these humans are potential prey as well. Getting to know the characters means that you can understand their desires to either aid or manipulate them for your own benefit, and your choices will affect her moral trajectory as well, either holding on to what's left of her humanity or to embrace being a creature of the night. Interestingly, you can level up your skill and knowledge in art, literature, history, and science, with knowledge as your greatest weapon in navigating political intrigue, class conflict, and corruption, having adventure game style mechanics like clue finding, calendar management, and more, and certainly looks unique. But if you prefer pixel art, Ale Abbey might be of interest, a management sim where you are in charge of a monastery brewery. You have to build and expand the monastery, funding it through crafting unique ale recipes, brewing holy ales, and selling them for profit. The core building and expansion systems will provide the foundation for your brewery, most importantly giving you access to monks and nuns who will do the work, with what seems to be a pretty involved beer brewing system as well, since you can craft 20 styles of European ale by meticulously choosing equipment, adjusting the quantity and quality of ingredients as well as the temperature, thereafter to decide on whether to store them for aging or to sell them at the market. The monastery also does not exist in isolation, so in Tycoon game fashion, I expect pop-up text windows describing events and giving you options on what to do, with scenarios like having to appease the feudal lords, befriending neighbouring abbeys, or managing bandit encounters. This is in addition to the Tycoon systems of building more living quarters to get access to more manpower, but also it is a monastery after all, so rooms like libraries or refectories must be built as well, all with a wonderful look. With the early access release planned for 4 to 10 months, with the main mechanics already being in place, with more variety and side content to be added, with another pixel art title of interest being Tiny Pasture, the latest in the bottom-of-screen idle game that was made popular by Rusty's retirement, where it kind of surprised me that it took this long for similar looking games to be released. But of course, the advantage here is that it has absolutely adorable pixel art animals that look very good. The game allows you to purchase and nurture baby animals, watch them grow, and collect coins they produce upon maturing, where interacting with your animals accelerates their growth and increases their productivity, while simultaneously decreasing yours, I would think, if you're working on the computer, where I do like games like this in concept, but they do seem very distracting. However, if you were to treat it as leisure and to have that game on while watching, I don't know, all of my YouTube videos on loop or something, then yep, this looks great for that, with some expanded systems like increasing the pasture size, breeding animals, and using magical facilities to maintain a healthy and vibrant environment where it's nice to see titles like this being made. The same can be said for the long in development Peripetia, a game which has been on Steam since November 2020, but yet I have somehow not come across it until this week, slowly gaining wishlists and momentum through that process, and is in the top 400 most wishlisted games on Steam. This is a first-person title that blends shooting, stealth, and RPG elements, drawing upon developers like Ion Storm and Looking Glass Studios, who are known for the immersive sim such as in Deus Ex and Thief, but in an alternate history cyberpunk Poland. You play as a young cybernetic super soldier who is establishing herself as a mercenary in this post-Soviet city rife with corruption and opportunity, allowing for various approaches to its missions, whether through direct combat or stealth. There's a dynamic light and shadow system for stealth, an intricate inventory management system, and the ability to interact deeply with NPCs, where your actions will shape the narrative and the world. The developers also talk about vertical level design, as you can create climbing routes virtually anywhere, which should help with the im-sim core of the game, and it's a trippy and awesome look as well. And speaking of great looking games, as a pixel art fan, this roguelite dice builder RPG certainly has my attention, where the most impressive thing about this game is that the developer has already released multiple demos and have continually updated and patched the demo versions, with each release getting better and coverage on YouTube and more momentum for the game, which makes Die in the Dungeon a sure bet for fans of strategy RPGs, since it is tactical but has enough randomness and theory crafting to make it so appealing. And while it is an early access release, the full game loop is complete and will have 3 characters at launch with more to be added, but I'm confident in the quality of this. Hello indie game fans, it's the week of the Steam Next Festival with apparently 2,500 demos to try, so it's technically the smart move not to release an indie game this week, but we still have developers that are going to try, where I've included updates and 1.0 releases here with a number of roguelites, survival games, and a couple of unique looking titles. So let's begin with BlueCloud Summit, a roguelite deck building RPG where you ascend above the blue clouds to the world's highest peak, fighting your way to reach a gateway to a heavenly realm. This looks like your classic Slay the Spire inspired title, but with some okay looking visuals and models, and has over 500 unique cards across 6 elemental types, enabling countless build possibilities with a randomly generated hex grid map, and of course the usual synergistic builds and combos that you need to figure out, kind of reminding me of Neoverse and Could Be Neat, with our first survival game of the video being Aska, or more specifically, their February major update, which added a bunch of tree stuff, the ability to regenerate resources that are not just limited to regrowing trees, but also iron and stone, but watch out for cave-ins when digging, as well as a bunch of creepy crawlies, overhaul of fisherman boats and more, where this Norse mythology themed title with a village building and NPC management aspect has really impressed so far and looks to get even better. Drill Core expands its subterranean adventures with the Jungle update, introducing a lush tropical biome teeming with new challenges and opportunities. You can now undertake contracts on jungle planets, navigating vibrant green landscapes filled with unique flora and fauna. This update adds 11 distinct block types such as the Slime block, which descends when unsupported, potentially trapping workers, and the Spore block, releasing spores that generate additional blocks, complicating excavation efforts. This update also introduces 9 new enemies, including the Sporeling, which spawns smaller adversaries upon defeat, and the Parasite, which attaches itself to another enemy and enhances their defenses until the parasite is eliminated. A formidable boss, the Spore Lord, is also new, which has subspecies of its own with unique abilities such as invisibility or explosive demise, so you really need to think about it when engaging these new foes. Luckily, you will have 4 new cores to help, such as the Plasma Core, which emits lightning bolts that stun enemies, or the Phoenix Core, which can resurrect itself upon destruction, along with a bunch of other new features and improvements that makes this even better, as is the case for the Contamination update for Picayune Dreams, an interesting Blood Heaven roguelite title that has been described as Vampire Survivors meets Yume Nikki, with the update adding an array of new weapons and skills, offering fresh strategies to combat increasingly complex enemy encounters. New suits provide unique abilities and playstyles, which will be required to tackle new bosses and enemies, each designed to test your adaptability and skill. These enemies have their own unique attack patterns and behaviors, requiring you to adjust your tactics accordingly, with new achievements, new songs, new game modes like free play and monthlies, adding even more replayability, all for free, with the base game being very affordable as well, so why not check this out. This next title might not look like one, but Card Survival Fantasy Forest is indeed a survival game, but not in the sense of a first or third person entry, but rather one that uses cards instead. It might not look like much, but one of you in the comments made it a point to tell me about this game, so here it is. Why I found this to be of interest, since it is not only the sequel to Card Survival Tropical Island from 2022, which has almost 2,500 Steam reviews and an overwhelmingly positive rating, but also that it comes to us from the developer of Card Quest, one of my favourite and most underrated deck builders, so I'm definitely interested in this. You find yourself in a primordial forest teeming with beasts, spirits and monsters, having to survive and carve out a home in this untamed wilderness, utilizing a deep and detailed system presented through card-based mechanics. Every action, from foraging to crafting, is executed by using or combining cards in a manner similar to Stacklands, but with less of a real-time progress bar element to this game. It has a dynamic ecosystem where your actions influence animal and plant populations, with additional factors like the seasons and weather to deal with as well. Rather than simple hunger or thirst meters, you have digestion, immunity, wounds, and mental health, where you can even track everything from body weight, calluses, or even stool consistency, so it's not your typical survival game by any means. Adding to this are activities like herbalism, where you forage for plants to brew concoctions, or agriculture, which allows you to cultivate crops. Hunting and animal husbandry offers avenues to secure food and resources, while cooking allows you to create dishes influenced by ingredient quality and your culinary skills, where you also have crafting and building systems, combat, and even magic, looking insanely in-depth, so do not judge a book by its cover. Other games begin with Crook Crusader's Spawn of the Spore Spectre, a free standalone prologue of a 2D precision platformer named Crook Crusader Champion of Canada, where in this game you play as Toadman, a mysterious evil doppelganger on a quest for revenge against the hero of the main game, Captain Croak. The gameplay focuses on high-speed traversal and intense combat, allowing you to zip through levels using the grappling hook while dispatching enemies in a flurry of violence, encouraging creative approaches such as ramming into enemies or throwing them against walls and floors. It is pretty fast-paced and intense, with a distinctive art style as well, so for free, why not give this a go, with an ambitious-looking pixel art title being Dead City, a pixel art open-world life simulation RPG where after a disastrous island vacation gone wrong, you find yourself indebted to a notorious mob boss, owing him $10,000 with only 10 days to repay. This game offers unparalleled freedom, allowing you to choose your path, pursue honest work by stocking shelves or cleaning schools, or to delve into the city's criminal underworld by accepting assassination contracts or crafting illicit substances for the black market. You only have a limited number of actions per day, which requires strategic planning to maximize your productivity and to avoid exhaustion, since that in turn could lead to hospitalization and additional medical bills. Beyond the primary objective of debt repayment, you can explore the city and engage in leisure activities such as minigames on a retro console, try your luck at the casino, enjoy drinks at the local bar, or even to return to the island for a brief respite, with the open-ended structure of the game giving you plenty of options. It does have multiple endings with 4 distinct outcomes based on your choices and action, and while it is pixel art and has a sense of humor to it, they are going for a darker and more mature tone in terms of writing and storytelling, and looks like the hidden gem of the week. We also had the surprise release of Doors of Insanity Reopen, halfway between a sequel and a remake of the original from 2021 that has you trapped in a bizarre labyrinth of purgatory, having to open random doors in hopes of finding a way to escape, where each door represents unpredictable challenges. With over 100 unique cards, you can craft powerful decks utilizing synergies between cards to do ridiculous actions like transforming enemies into gold or to throw food at enemies and more, with their loot and equipment system layering on top of that. For example, with the Man Mincer weapon turning enemies into consumable attack boosting meatloaves. New in this version are the dice, which add in even more randomness, like doubling your stats or to use your health in order to play cards, with a bunch of interesting and weird characters and enemies to encounter as well. I've been a big fan of this developer due to their art, which looks great, so this is an interesting release from them. And speaking of interesting games, Face Minor is a narrative-driven thriller clicker set in an alternate history 1999, where you're building up a biometric data harvesting empire from the ground up. Your role involves classifying facial data, managing data mining infrastructure, and expanding your AI surveillance operations. Starting with manual data filtering, you gradually automate processes, upgrade your systems to handle increasing workloads, but also have to consider the business end of things, and to remain profitable, you need to manage electricity consumption, cooling systems, and navigate regulatory challenges like politically enforced carbon offsetting schemes, with a simulated corporate office environment as well, with office gossip spreading through internal corporate messages, where if you read them all, you might just be able to unveil the secrets behind the shadowy creators of the Face Minor software suite, giving you a whole new way of looking at Facebook as a concept, and might be closer to reality than you might think, with AI-powered surveillance being a very real thing in 2025. And speaking of a modern trend, Flash Doll is a gacha game that has you opening blind boxes to unlock new customizable combat-ready dolls, using these to battle in real-time action, but most importantly, does not have any microtransactions and is a one-off purchase. You can design and customize the characters, equipping them with various weapons, accessories, and hit pieces before delving into intense automated battles, being an auto-battler by another name, but looks much nicer than some other entries in this space. The combat system allows you to customize move sets by different skill chips, creating new and unique combos to outmaneuver your opponents. There is a leaderboard style ranking system where accumulating battle points elevates your status as you aim for the top, also having a pose mode to model, show off and display your characters, blending the fun of collectibles and blind boxes with a fun combat system which is not exploitative, where I'm interested to see where this goes and what the post-launch support would be like, with a different kind of multiplayer title being Grapples Galore, one that you might be more familiar with since it is a fast-paced online multiplayer arena shooter, but one which emphasizes physics-based grappling hook movement and active ragdoll mechanics. You use your grappling hook to swing across the level, grabbing weapons and engaging in thrilling gunfights with other players, where of course, mastering the grappling hook will be crucial for your success. There are currently 8 unique maps and 4 distinct game modes, 9 different weapons and character customization for your in-game avatar, and is free to play with microtransactions, but if you're into multiplayer title, I would recommend jumping in if you're even a little bit interested, since you know how quickly player populations can fall off in indie multiplayer titles like this. The Steam Next Fest is full of demos, but some developers did do the smart thing by front-running the event and releasing their demos earlier, with that being the case for Heroes of Mount Dragon as well, a 2.5D side-scrolling beat-em-up in which you choose from heroes and battle through hordes of enemies, with the gimmick in this game being that every character is able to transform into a dragon, so how awesome does that sound? In this demo, you can choose from 4 out of 8 heroes from the full game, each having their own distinct fighting styles and special abilities, using these in devastating combos to defeat your foes. And as is genre norms, we'll have couch co-op support so you can play with friends, where this genre is about as classic as it can get, so if you're a fan like me, do check it out, with a very different and interesting kind of game being Omega 6 The Triangle Stars, a throwback pixel art adventure game with quite the pedigree, since this is based on a manga created by Takaya Imamura, who worked at Nintendo for 32 years and last held the position of art director there. And according to Wikipedia, he designed the characters from F-Zero, including Captain Falcon and the supporting characters in Star Fox, as well as notably Tingle, where he left Nintendo in 2021 and made this manga, with this, of course, being the video game adaptation of that. This is a retro-futuristic adventure game that follows 2 androids, Thunder and Kyla, on a quest to find a new home for humanity. Their journey takes them to 3 distinct planets: Impostar, a hub for diverse aliens; Igni, a fire world with a harsh environment; and Frostlara, a frozen planet inhabited by the wealthy. Throughout their adventure, they will encounter various aliens, engage in turn-based battles using action cards in a rock-paper-scissors-like fashion, and explore different roles such as bounty hunters or delivery personnel. Combat is enhanced by the presence of a bonsai tree inside your spaceship that can influence battles by boosting abilities or swapping cards, but it doesn't go so far as having a full-on JRPG type turn-based combat system. Of course, I do like the art, having some awesome character designs that should be no surprise given the creator, and is supposed to have a rich narrative infused with mystery and drama, and thus continue a trend of awesome adventure and narrative titles in February. And speaking of trends, I do have to mention R.E.P.O as well, the latest co-op horror title following in the footsteps of Lethal Company, where in 2025 alone, we have had titles like The Headliners and UNDERWARD already. This game is set in a world where humanity has vanished, replaced by robots and various monsters, and you play as a robot tasked with locating and retrieving valuable remnants of the ancient human civilization. You move through dark, perilous locations searching for items ranging from ceramics to pianos, all while evading or confronting enemies, adding physics into the mix for more hilarity, since the object that you were so carefully carrying could easily drop and shatter. After a successful extraction, you can sell these items for money, used for various upgrades and weapons, so it's that familiar gameplay loop, this time supporting up to 6 players, where it's difficult to tell how big a hit these will be, since it does really depend on your group of friends, but should be of note as will be Shift and Slay, a turn-based tactical roguelite in a cyberpunk setting where interestingly, you control only a single character in a classic square grid-based combat system. Your character is aiming to break free from a time loop created by powerful corporations, with each turn presenting a strategic puzzle that requires careful planning and execution. It encourages going on the offense, since every enemy defeated grants you an additional turn, allowing you to chain together attacks to clear the board of enemies, with a range of different upgrades and abilities, including ranged attacks, melee attacks, or even traps at your disposal. Every level is procedurally generated, so each run will be fresh, having some brutal looking animations and a great vibe, the opposite of which is Stellar Settlers, a pretty chill space base builder title where you're building a colony on alien planets. This released out of early access, so it's a good time to jump in, having both vertical and horizontal base building mechanics which will factor into the design of your base. Each planet and biome will have different challenges and hostile environments to tackle, requiring you to adapt your strategies to survive, with the classic base builder gameplay loop of gathering resources, constructing buildings, managing your settlers, and advancing up the tech tree, with the goal in each being to build a spaceship so that you can escape that planet and go to new worlds. This has multiple modes, including classic, chill, sandbox, spaceship building, mayhem and base defense, catering to different playstyles and preferences, and provides variety even within the game, and is a very pleasant title. But if you want a more retro experience, Tomb Raider 4-6 Remastered will be of note, the next set of Tomb Raider games to be remastered following that of 1-3 in February 2024. This includes The Last Revelation, Chronicles, and The Angel of Darkness with enhanced visuals with updated textures, lighting, and character models, providing a fresh experience for both returning fans and newcomers. You can choose between classic and modernized controls according to your preferences, and includes a new photo mode that lets you capture iconic moments with various poses and outfits, as well as the Fly-By Camera Maker, which enables the creation of cinematic shots by placing cameras along a path. Of course, there are various quality of life improvements as well to make it feel more modern and should be of interest, with our next title being the 1.0 release of Whisker Squadron Survival, which, contrary to the title, is not a Vampire Survivors style game, but is instead a roguelite on-rails space shooter similar to something like Star Fox, and comes to us from the developer of Raise the Sun. You control a customizable fighter ship, engaging in dynamic battles against waves of robotic enemies known as the Swarm, with a 3-act campaign of branching paths, each introducing new enemies and challenging boss fights. There are 3 distinct ships, each with its own set of weapons and abilities, as well as permanent upgrades from run to run, and is a neat little game. The best games begin with the 1.0 release of Long Winter, a game that made waves when it first released in early access, since it looks like bootleg Animal Crossing but is actually good, being an open-world multiplayer sandbox game that combines elements of survival, crafting, and social interaction. Set on Long Winter Island, you can fish, farm, craft, gather, and cook, so fairly innocent life sim stuff, but then the game reveals that you have access to straight up assault rifles in this game and can loot or steal from other players. It has a handcrafted open world where you can explore and discover the beauty of the natural environment, build your camp anywhere you desire, but ideally somewhere defensible, alongside fellow players, and to upgrade your base along 8 different paths to match your playstyle. You can craft new items and gear, customize weapons and paint your furniture, farm to grow crops, prepare and cook food, and also to trade with other players for special goods or rare items. But again, don't be fooled by the visuals, since some people have compared this to Rust in how absolutely brutal it can be, but it's definitely a cool, weird release of note in 2025, as will be a biotic factor whenever it releases out of early access, since this is a first-person survival game with a twist, being set in a Black Mesa-like underground research facility rather than on some tropical island, having a stunning 20,000 Steam reviews as of recording, and is one of the most successful releases of 2024, which just released the Dark Energy update. This includes massive new areas like power services and the reactors, with a new enemy faction introduced named the Gatekeepers, new technology like teleportation pads, hard light technology that allows you to create bridges, an expanded pet system that allows you to tame the creatures you encounter, new weapons, armor, and so much more, where they did just confirm PS5 and Xbox Series launches when it releases out of early access in summer 2025, but I see plenty of room for this to be expanded upon post-launch. And speaking of 1.0 releases, Door Kickers 2 Task Force North did that as well, being the follow-up to Door Kickers from 2014, and the developer is continuing to crush it with this real-time tactics title. command military special ops teams conducting high-stakes operations against a Middle East-based terrorist organization. Building upon its predecessor, this installment introduces enhanced 3D graphics and a range of new features, allowing you to choose from multiple playable factions as an example, each offering unique equipment and tactical approaches. The game emphasizes meticulous planning and execution, but also allows you to pause at any time to adjust your strategies, ensuring flexibilities during intense missions, especially since the environment is highly interactive and destructible. You can breach walls, utilize night vision in darkened rooms, and use a variety of weapons from assault rifles to RPGs, with the enemy being able to do the same, adding layers upon layers of tactical considerations that will test your decision making and leadership skill while under fire. Interestingly, it does have a cooperative multiplayer mode that enables you to team up with others, coordinating tactics to complete missions, with a level editor, mod support, Steam Deck verification and more, and is up there among the best games of the year, as will be Monster Train 2 whenever it releases. Since this is probably the biggest news story that I have been sitting on and was looking for a place to put it, where the game was just announced, had a playable demo and immediately shot up the charts in terms of most anticipated games. This is a roguelite deck builder which expands upon the original with new clans, cards and strategic elements, with the demo version allowing you to try 2 of the 5 new clans, each introducing unique mechanics and playstyles. The game retains its signature multi-level combat system where you must defend your train's pyre from waves of enemies by strategically placing units and casting spells across different floors, with all new room and equipment cards, and narratively has you fighting your way into heaven instead of descending into hell, where my wife loved the original and she's been playing the demo all weekend, so take it from her that this is great, where you can take my word on this next game since Hades 2 is my jam, and they released their second major update titled The War Song, reintroducing Murder Pervert Ares the War God, a final confrontation on the surface, a new animal familiar, updated upgrades, 2,000 new voice lines and so much more, where I'm confident that this will eventually surpass the original in terms of sales. Watch this video for the best upcoming action roguelites.